Hello and welcome back to Scale Modelling Cafe, and welcome to a re-recorded part 2 because I did have some volume problems with the previous one. I thought I sorted it out, but turned out I hadn't, so I thought I'd just re-record the audio. Now here I am just making some few improvements to the plastic, so just drilling out all the lightning holes. This makes a really big difference with the Eduard cockpit, and I would say actually that the Eduard brassing is not required. I did the same with the seat mount, but didn't make such a tidy job of it. They're not quite in line, the lightning holes, but again it all creates the impression of detail. So we'll just glue that in position, and then we are ready to put the other pieces on. That all starts with the photo etch. So this is the head armour. Now the locating for this is pretty sketchy actually. You've just got some very small kind of raised rivet type things. So the gluing surface is actually quite small. Just to help that, I applied a little bit of super glue, as you can see here, just kind of touching it in the areas where it attaches, just to create a stronger bond, which I'm going to claim success because it's still on there, and that is much more refined than the plastic part. This little metal widget here, so this is folded up from quite a few layers actually, but most of that's hidden. You've got the back armour that will cover that up. So that's a little bit of photo etch there on the compressed air bottles, thanks to one of the viewers who pointed that out. It was compressed air, not oxygen. Obviously that's on the other side. I did some more lightning holes, just drilled out these ones in the lower sort of fuselage half, just to increase the depth. That makes a big difference actually. So I'm using the Barracuda Studios Cockpit Snapshot Upgrade. This is the throttle, which as you can see I drilled and pinned just for extra strength. You do get the mounting lug on the inside, so you don't really need it, but you know, belt and braces. And now for some extra wiring. So I used a mixture of wires, some copper wire from Electrical Flex and some lead wire, and it makes a real big difference. This actually, just dressing up the cockpit increases the busyness, if you like, and the detail. Now I didn't have my primary reference book, which is the Valiant book. In fact, the Valiant book series, all of them are superb for modelers. So this is the Barracuda seat. It's more detailed than the kick seat. It's got the reproduction of the padding on the backrest is really very nice, and as you can see it's got a moulded in harness. So if you're not a fan of photo etch, this is definitely the way ahead. In preparation for some of the other Barracuda resin parts, some of the detail and mounting lugs have to be removed. So here I am using an inappropriate blade. I should have used a curved blade. And I found that adding the wiring onto the parts that are still on the casting block is an extra pair of hands. It makes it much easier. I thought I'd try and add some extra riveting. So just using a rivet wheel, this is the rosy one. I just went along and just added them just along some of the structural parts. I don't know whether this is accurate or not, but I thought I'd do it anyway. And you can see it just kind of adds that extra dimension. So some more lightning holes, this time in the instrument panel mounting thing. and some wires. Now you've got to be careful with these wires because they can interfere with the fit. And adding some resin. So the resin mount from the Barracuda set for the compass is much more detailed, as are the rudder pedals. So quite often I won't prime in the cockpit, but because of the different mediums, I've got photo etch and resin and plastic, I just thought I'd whack down some Mr. Surfacer. And the aim of this is not only to aid paint adhesion, especially on some of the resin and metal parts, but just try and get an even colour ready for the top coat, because I don't want the tone of the paint to be altered by the material underneath. So just getting a nice even colour, and that worked well. So the front half was sprayed with the green from MRP, and then the rear was A-Stand duralumin. That's my go-to metal colour actually, is duralumin from A-Stand. If you've got some of the Alclad stuff still left in stock, it's pretty much the same. And there's the other half. Bit of a tricky masking job that with the door. Not forgetting the lower fuselage halves, although to be honest, trying to see that through the glass, yeah, it's pretty difficult. Okay, so it skews the you'll be able to see flashes of my sort of head mounted magnifier thing. Eyes are getting a bit old these days. The seat was hand painted after the initial base coat of green. So this is just using Armour of MIG. This is a dark rust colour. These seats were a sort of compressed cardboard paper with plasticizer type thing. Not Bakelite. People think they were Bakelite. They weren't. And best to build up the coats to an isopaque layer. So just use 2 or 3 coats here. And you'll see I'm painting around the detail. You could just go in and just paint the whole thing brown and then the whole thing black. Well, not the whole thing black, but the backrest black, and then go over and do the seat harness. But I just decided to try and keep the paint layers to a minimum. So here's the aforementioned backrest then. So again, using Armour of MIG acrylics. I kind of went down the figure painting route here. So just built up the layers of diluted, lightened paint layers, just almost like glazes, going in, just trying to increase that 3D effect on that backrest, trying to bring out some of that lovely moulded in detail that Roy's done. That's Roy Sutherland of Barracuda Cast, or Barracuda Studios I should say. You can see here also on the seat I've added the top resin part from the harness. That's a separate piece, just to avoid it getting broken in packaging, I guess. And then here we are going in with the glazes, and then just at the end I used some Tamiya accent colour wash, just the black, just to touch in and go in through the details, just to make them pop. So this is a light wood colour. The other colours I had were a little bit sort of too yellow for the canvas straps for the Sutton harness, so I used this kind of wood colour. Again, acrylic from Armour of MIG, and then finished off with all the metal parts and the buckles and things. Just wiping away any excess paint there on the thumb. And it's a bit of a cliche to say this is a little model all in itself, but it's a little model all in itself. So sorry about that, but it's true. It was great fun painting this up, and I'm going to try and do more of these, I think, sort of resin moulded in harness seats. To increase the depth in the cockpit, I brush painted some of the ammo version of their cockpit green, which is a lot paler than the MRP, and it does a really good job, as you can see, of just making the highlighted detail just pop. I also used it as the first layer of paint chipping as well. You'll see that in a little bit. Now on the other cockpit half, the lower cockpit half, there's these two big sort of rectangular bits which the instructions call out for you to paint in black, but they weren't, they were green. So you'll see me in a little bit having painted those in this lighter green colour. There we go. So the aforementioned chipping then. So in a nod to Rick, I thought I'd do some armour chipping technique on the cockpit armour. So I went in with the lighter colour of the green first, and then sponge chipping followed up by a brush just for the sort of dark steel colour. Now obviously this is a dark rust. Whether these rusted or not, I don't know. They were steel, but I really like the effect actually. Trying to do the chipping here with the sort of silver colour on such a light green doesn't really work. So I did like the armour technique of trying to get that 3D chipping effect. Now we can start putting things together. So I've painted the wires here in a sort of buff colour and just using a tiny bit of super glue just to glue them in place. Now as I mentioned earlier, you've got to be careful here because this part will sit in the recess and these wires can interfere with the fit. So just make sure that you leave a little gap on the left hand side there for it to sit in. There's the throttle all painted up. And then going in there with a small brush now with some black. It's a fairly simple colour scheme. Green, black, silver, and not much sort of colour. Just taking your time. These are actually quite small, these bits. So just trying to be accurate as possible. Diluting the paint can really help. You can go in with some paint pens even, but yeah, I prefer the paintbrush if I'm honest. Now I glued this little part proud so I could slip in that masking tape in behind, which preserved things. And now gluing things together. So don't copy me with these two parts here. I actually glued them too far forward and they sit too close to the instrument panel. I did realise that when I was putting things together and I could have fixed it, but to be honest I couldn't be bothered. So I just left it. On my next one I will glue them a little bit further back. Again, probably as a consequence of not having my references with me. Another consequence of not having the references with me is the pathways of the wiring. So, not strictly accurate, I'm sure. I just kind of used a little bit of logic, trying to make things look a bit busy. And I think I achieved the aim, but it's not necessarily 100% accurate, I'm sure. Now this is the undercarriage selector. That's, you can see there the copper wires. That's the resin part. It is more detailed than the kit part. I struggled getting it into place. It's got all the moulded recesses for the kit bits to slot into. It's just I was being a bit ham-fisted. And you can see with the added resin bits and all the added wiring, it starts to look quite busy quite quickly. So the advantage of this lead wire is it's very easy to mould into shape. The disadvantage is you can get sort of kinks and things in it that are very hard to get out. So some of the wires can look a little bit wobbly. The other thing you've got to bear in mind as well is all the other bits that are going to go in. So we've got the bulkheads and the seat and all those sorts of things. And if you're not careful, it can all interfere with the fit. So you'll see there that the oxygen hose is being glued into place. That does a really good job of busying up. Otherwise, that panel there is quite a big gap. So I really like that bit. I think that's fantastic. And being lead wire, it's very easy to trim away the excess, and there you can see the detailed result. That's the other side. Just putting in the trim wheel. That's resin. That is supplied in plastic, but the resin one is more refined. Now to make this detail pop. So using a dark green wash or a dark grey green wash. So the base I used was Starship Filth from Ammo of MiG, and just added a little bit of grey to it. Diluted it with some enamel thinner and just touching it in there, running along the detail. I did the same technique on the metal parts, but less green, more grey. The eagle-eyed amongst you may notice some decals have been applied. So these are supplied in the Barracuda set. Some of them are absolutely tiny, but it all adds to that busyness. They really are superb, those decals. You're definitely going to need an optivisor or something to use them, but the final result is absolutely brilliant. Now, no varnish here. The MRP and the metallic paints are shiny enough that you don't need it. So the cleanup was a simple job, just using a cotton bud, wiping away the excess. And then in the harder to reach areas and the nooks and crannies, I went in with a brush and just tidied things up there. You can even do a little bit of streaking when you get the brush out. Really makes the detail pop on the seat here. So here's the brush, slightly moistened with thinner, and we should tidy things up. You can see that the brush sort of disappears. I'm just wiping it on my thumb, just getting rid of the excess wash that accumulates on the brush. And quite a subtle technique, but works really well. In another nod to Rick, some more armour techniques, this time some streaking. Not rain streaking that you might think. This is more condensation, so especially in the morning in the summer, then even in the desert you can get quite a lot of streaking effects here, and it's just where the condensation just runs down and just draws down that dust and dirt, and then everything is sealed with a satin varnish. My go-to satin varnish is from So everything's sealed in with a layer of VMS satin varnish. Kills the shine, but there's still a little bit of a sheen there, as you can see. And especially the right-hand cockpit half looks really sort of lived in now with that varnish. The detail from the resin really adds to the cockpit and the overall effect. Big fan. Now for the instrument panel, decided to use the Eduard Photo Etch here. So it actually fell off originally. But what I do with my Eduard panels is I will apply a layer of matte varnish. Very careful to avoid the actual instruments because they are glossy. And you can see here where I've just masked these the instruments, and the difference that that matte varnish makes, it completely kills that sort of not matrix speckly effect from the printing. So having knocked off the background for the instrument panel, I went in and I did it again. You can see that I'm just slightly bending it. It had curved up. So just bending it back into a little bit more of a flat shape, spreading it around to make sure glue is applied to the edges, and then just popping that in place. Just applying a little bit of super glue to the back part of this this sort of layered approach. Now it's you've got to be very careful not to smudge the sort of glossy glue on the matte finish. And there's the effect. Really nice instrument panel. Now time to put it all together. So I'd added these sort of steel pins for the seat mounting. They were a little bit too long, so just trim those off with an old sprue cutter. And then I deviated slightly from the instructions. I have had problems in the past of when gluing the lower side panels to the fuselage halves and then gluing the sort of seat and the bulkheads to them. It kind of draws it in and you end up with a little bit of a gap at the wing roots. So glued the right hand fuselage half in, then glued the bulkheads and the seat assembly in, and then finally glued the I was just shaking out a little bit of excess wire there, and then just finally glued in the left hand sort of lower fuselage bit. Just trying to feed all the wires through. Doing it this way was a little bit more complicated, trying to glue the rudder pedals in place, which I did get a little bit wonky. So I think on the next one I am going to actually follow the instructions and build up the cockpit tub and then stick it into the fuselage. So there I'm just putting the other cockpit sidewall in. Actually, following the instructions is going to make it more complicated with the wiring. So I don't know. I'll have another think. And then what I'm doing here is I'm just taping together the fuselage halves just to allow the cockpit glue to set so it's all in exactly the right place. What you don't want to do is something to move or something and it's going to interfere and it's going to cause you problems. So just taping the fuselage together while the glue sets is a good way of ensuring alignment. And here is the finished cockpit in the fuselage halves. You can see how busy it all looks in there with the added wiring and the superb Barracuda Studios Cockpit Snapshot Upgrade set. Just some high-res pictures now, and just going through the various stages of construction, so you can see all the sub-assemblies and then the finished cockpit. And in just a second I'll show you how Rick's got on with his. So really interesting to see how Rick has tackled his. He's also using the Barracuda set, and really, yeah, as I said, really interesting to see how a dyed-in-the-wall armour / diorama guy is tackling the an aeroplane kit. So this is the aeroplane that Rick's doing. He's going to recreate this scene on the Sicilian beach of the shot down Spitfire. So using washes, sort of the read across from the armour and sort of sci-fi world into aeroplanes works very well. Now Rick, not being that experienced with aeroplanes, he has done some in the past. So pop over to Rick's channel and you can see his video, which has just recently gone up. And that's the end of part 2. So in the next part, we'll deal with the airframe. Should be quite a quick episode. It's a simple kit really, but I do deviate from the instructions to improve the fit here and there. And this is Rick's model. So thanks very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed that, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers, bye bye.